Little did I know at the age of 26, I would be concerned about my friends worrying about my own mortality. I woke up standing, wearing only my underwear, and I felt a hand on my back, and somebody said, "Don't worry, we'll get it in the right place very soon." What the hell was happening? I had no idea, and then I lost consciousness. I was confused. I was confused more when I woke up and not knowing where I was. I looked around. It was a hospital bed in a hospital room. What had happened to me? I had no idea. I learned that I had been subject to a lumbar puncture. That is also known as a spinal tap. A spinal tap requires a 9-inch needle to be poked into your spine to pull spinal fluid out for testing. And they never get it in the first time, or the many times they try. So while I had been unconscious, my body had been attacked, and I didn't know what was going on. Now, I was in this situation because of sleeping. I had actually graduated college and had taken on a technology job in Melbourne, and it was a few weeks away, so I celebrated with all my friends. It was great to be the center of the attention. We probably partied just a little too much. And then I thought I'd go home for the last few days and rest and recover at my parents' house. Now, for me at that time, sleeping was the thing I would do all day long. Napping was great. I had no set schedule. It was wonderful. And during one of those days, my dad walked in to see me having what he thought was a seizure. Now, I knew about fainting because that started in an assembly in primary school, and that happened several times a year. But we didn't know, so I was off to the doctor. And I explained to the doctor what had happened, but he was baffled as well as I. So they sent me to the hospital for tests, where I became a human pincushion while I was unconscious. Now, the episode that I had, that my dad saw, was not fainting. Why? Because the fainting that I had experienced, when I came to, there was a party going on. All my senses were in overload, they were heightened, and every sound and every noise was exaggerated. There was a party. And then, after a few moments, I would come to, and this wasn't anything like that. So we didn't know what was going on. Now, when I left the hospital, still embarrassed to be in my undies, we went home to get changed and pack for the trip to the city. I was unable to drive, so my parents had to take me, and I lay flat in the front passenger seat for the way. And we get to my college town, and we stop for a coffee with a friend of mine. He was not home, so we walked in with his dad, and he invited us in for a cup of coffee, and we sat down and told him about my seizures and how the epilepsy happened. And then we left and got back on the road. Now, after a first week of training, I took a day off and we went and had several tests. I had a CT scan, an EEG, and lots of blood work. And I was poked and I was prodded, and the results were inconclusive. Of course, my dad asked if during the tests they found a brain. Way to go, Dad. Kick a son when he's down. But the test being inconclusive, the doctors didn't know what was happening. Was it really epilepsy? So they prescribed Dilantin. It's a blood thinner that is meant to stop seizures from coming out of your brain. But most of the people who take it call it rat poison. And so the consequences, the side effects were disastrous. So I just took myself off. Years later, I'm sitting in a dentist chair about to have my wisdom teeth removed, so surgery, and I need to be put out. So I lay my head back, open up my mouth, and the dentist brings a big needle full of anesthesia and shoved it in my gum. I fainted. And as I came to, I tried to sit up, so he pushed me down. I tried to sit up again, he pushed me down again. And then everything calmed, and I was okay and quiet. And I could see that this disturbed him greatly. He asked, have you had any seizures in your life before? I didn't want to tell medical professionals about my seizures because I had self-diagnosed and taken myself off, and that could impact it. But I admitted I had, and he said, you had a seizure sitting in my chair right now. Now, I was frustrated because it was a faint. When I came to, there was a party, there was a lot of noise, a lot of lights. I knew I had fainted, but he was adamant that in my history of seizures, it was a seizure, and I needed to go get a note from my doctor to allow him to work on my wisdom teeth. So I explained to the doctor what had happened about my seizures, and she asked me if I had been out late a lot the week before with very little sleep. And I confirmed that that was true. And then she asked me about the dentist chair. She said, had I eaten properly on that day? And I had to admit that I had not. So she looked thoughtful, she took a deep breath, and she gave her diagnosis. Trevor, you're an idiot. Next time you go to the dentist, eat properly before you have surgery so you don't faint again. She then described to me my seizures. They were called sleep-related hypermotor epilepsy. And this is when the brain's motor cortex is awake, but the rest of the brain is asleep, and that's conflict, and it causes mild seizures. Nothing like a true epileptic episode. So I went back. So following this, I decided that I would just go back to work and everything would be okay. And then going back to Australia earlier on, I realized that this was way before I knew about sleep-related hypermotor epilepsy. I was doing my job, everything was great. And I heard a rumor that in my college town, they were talking about me. There was something going on. And I was very flattered for the attention. And it turns out the rumor was that I had died. Now, this was confusing. I had to pinch myself a few times, and I realized I was actually alive. The challenge was I didn't know how to spread that rumor that I was alive because this was before texting and social media. And of course, all my friends are going to be worried what was happening and how did this begin? Turns out my friend's father did not understand the word epilepsy. So he told everybody I had contracted a disease called encephalitis. Encephalitis causes inflammation and swelling of the brain, and encephalitis kills. So my friends knew I had caught encephalitis and died. I had no idea how I could fix this. So at the end of the year, when New Year's Eve came around, I went back to my college town to show that I was alive. Maybe I'll run into a few of them. And I heard that some of them heard I was in town and not dead, so they had a contest to see who could hug me the first. So I was on alert and energized all night, got sympathetically drunk with all my friends so I could be on alert. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, my friend Kerry rushed me and enveloped me in a huge hug. And she told me close in my ear, she said, I told my mum, you know that nice boy Trevor, he died. And her mum cried. And that's when my tears began. And she pushed me back, stepped back a little, took a look up and down, and shouted so that the whole entire town could hear, "You're alive!" And I realized at that particular moment I was alive. It's easy to live day to day, just living, but to really live and suck the marrow out of every single moment, that was being alive. And I knew that was my truth, and no rumor could kill me. So I stepped back and I shouted, and the whole world could hear, "I'm alive!"